Hi everyone. Hi everyone. Thank you for um, tuning in to Dish and Tea with D. Um, as you all may know, there's this whole P Diddy thing going on. Puppy, all these other names, Sean Combs, whatever. Um, now there is an eighth victim speaking out. She is allegedly claiming all these things that all these other victims have come out to say, as well as y'all aware of Cassie Ventura and the video that came out with her, which obviously is proof to some of these allegations that some of these females and males have been discussing. So here we are, eighth lawsuit, and it gets really crazy. Her name is April Lampros. She was an FIT student at the time when she met Combs. So let's go ahead and take a deep dive into this lawsuit. Um, it is between April Lampros with, Sean Combs, Bad Boy Records, Arista Records, Sony Entertainment, John and Jane Doe's 1 through 10, and ABC Corp's 1 through 10. Um, the lawyer of this case as well is Blackburn. So here we are, as these are some of the alleged allegations that they're implementing. Plaintiff Lampros brings this section seeking injunctive, declaratory, and monetary relief against defendants in violation of the Victims of Gender Motivated Violence Protection Law, Gender Motivated Violence Act, NYC Admin Code 10-1101, so on and so forth. This cause of action is timely under the Victims of Gender Motivated Violence Protection Law, Gender Motivated Violence Act, NYC Admin Code. It arises of conduct perpetrated against plaintiff who was statutory age or older at the time. Um, so, as you may know, like they have all these laws that are coming out that is for a short time period. Just in NYC, like they basically put like a little sidetrack to it to say anybody who has been abused in the past, regardless of how far back it was, can still press basically have the accused punished. Um, it's like a 2 year time span, some sort. Let's see. So they go on to state. Let's see. So the first thing is the above described conduct of Defendant Combs, including but not limited to Defendant Combs, um, basically taking advantage of plaintiff in New York City, constitutes a crime of violence and a crime of violence motivated by gender against plaintiff and defined by the NYC Gender Motivated Violence Act. Of the conduct which constitutes multiple um, assaults offenses as defined in Article 130 of New York Penal Law. The suit arises from the actions of defendant Sean Combs, Mr. Combs' Bad Boy Records, Arista Records. It's a subsidiary of SME, which is Sony Entertainment, John and Jane Doe's 1 through 10, and ABC Corp's 1 through 10, and their participation in the harm visited upon plaintiff April Lampros. April Lampros is a Caucasian female and a United States citizen who was at all relevant times relevant to the action, a resident of and domiciled in the state of New York. North York, the state of North York. Mr. Combs is a United States citizen and was at all relevant times a resident of and domiciled in the state of New York. Upon information and belief, Mr. Combs is currently domiciled in both California and Florida. Upon information and belief, Mr. Combs divides his time equally upon between both states. Upon information and belief, AR, a global music company headquartered at New York, New York. Upon information and belief, a BB is a global music company headquartered at New York, New York. Upon information, belief, SME, a global music company headquartered at New York, New York. During the relevant period, defendants John and Jane Doe's 1 through 10 are currently unknown individuals and or employees who aided and or abetted in the commission of conduct complaint of herein and or who either acted within the scope of the employment defendants ratified, embraced, and added to this conduct. As parties engaged in discovery, plaintiff retains the right to amend the complaint to add these individual employees by name. During the relevant period, defendants ABC Corps 1 through 10 are currently unknown entities who employed plaintiff or aided and or abetted in the commission or conduct complaint or of herein as the parties engaged in discovery. Plaintiff retains the right to attend the complaint to add these entities or individuals by name. Oh, Lordy, this. Okay, this court has personal jurisdiction of the defendant under the consistent with the Constitution requirements of due process and the defendant acting directly or through his agents or apparent agents committed one or more of the following: the transaction of any business within the state, the making of any contract within the state, the commission of a tortious act within the district, and the ownership, use, or possession of any real estate in the state. Summary of factual accusations. Upon information and belief, Ms. Lampros and Mr. Combs in early 1994, after the birth of his first son, Justin Dior Combs, at at the time, Ms. Lampros was a college student at the Fashion Institute of Technology, FIT, studying fashion and design marketing. To impress her, Mr. Combs would often invite her to Bad Boy Records recording studios in New York City. Okay, so when she met Mr. Combs, Ms. Lampros shared with him her dreams of working in the fashion industry, and Mr. Combs promised to mentor her and help her by introducing her to music and fashion industry executives, as well as assisting her with finding work. So now he is making these promises. Mr. Combs loved Mr. Combs love bombed her. He showered her with gifts and flowers, as evidenced by one of the cards accompanied the flowers that Mr. Combs sent was Lampros for Valentine's Day 1994. It states, "Happy Valentine's Day, love, Puffy." Mr. Combs went so far as to invite Miss Lampros to his first Father's Day celebration. The invitation to the event is below. So it states, "Dear friends, on June 19, 1994, Bad Boy Entertainment would like for you to come and join us in celebrating the original Bad Boys' first Father's Day celebration. For this occasion, there is a dress code: no jeans or sneakers will be permitted. The spectacular event will be held at cap- the Capitol located at blah 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 whatever. The event will begin promptly at 10 p.m. and will go on until. Please come early to avoid any inconvenience. For further information, you can contact our office's bad boy for entertainment, yada yada yada. Remember, dress code will be strictly enforced, so dress best. Thanks for your support. Sincerely, Bad Boy Entertainment. This invite Emmett's one. What did you do with them? What'd you do with them? Okay. Let's see. Okay, and so it says a month after the Father's Day event, Mr. Combs invited Miss Lampros to an exclusive Bad Boy party with performances by Usher, Craig Mack, and the Notorious B.I.G. Ooh, interesting. Then it goes on to show the inside of the invitation. It has time, location, la la la. On the left hand side, it has like this little, I guess, phrase, saying, quote, whatever you want to put it, poem, whatever you want to say it is. It basically states how he needs to basically, like if you want to be successful, you have to be aggressive. You cannot take 1 second for granted. You always have to keep hustling. There's like basically don't sleep kind of thing. It's just on and on about a hidden. Basically, he's just calling himself out, I think. But anyway, that's my opinion. Who really cares? Video shows it all. Like he was just playing guilty once that video came out, and like that's just what it is. Like I was just waiting for this whole thing to go to court, so that way, like all this evidence. I'm an evidence person. You have to prove to me certain things when you want something. Like I'm not saying the victims it didn't happen, but at the same time, you gotta prove that it did happen because you want us to punish somebody. So there's got to be evidence on both sides. If you're stating that you're not, there better be evidence that you're not. If you're stating that you are, you better have evidence that you are. Plain and simple. That's why we have the justice system, but unfortunately that could be corrupt too. But a whole nother story. Okay, so let's go on. Upon information and belief, what Mr. Combs displayed as kind gestures quickly manifested into an aggressive, coercive, and abusive relationship based on sex. These acts were not isolated by this to the state of New York, as Mr. Combs would fly Miss Lampros to Atlanta and to see him, where they would spend time together. Miss Lampros would also fly to Miami to see Mr. Combs at his home. Upon information and belief throughout the years, Mr. Combs, there were four terrifying encounters Miss Lampros endured. According to Miss Lampros, Mr. Combs had a terrible temper and often threatened to harm her if she failed to do what he said. If he witnessed her talking to another man, or if she failed to take his phone calls. According to Miss Lampros, she was also not allowed to talk about her relationship with Mr. Combs to anyone because he did not want anyone to know he was seeing her because she was white woman. Basically, says it right there. Okay, so now we're going to get into the encounters. So if you don't want to hear this, I suggest you la la la, have la, change the channel. But unfortunately, this is what is. written. So, encounter number one. The first horrific blank encounter occurred in 1995 when Miss Lampros met up with Mr. Combs in South of Houston Street, Soho, at a bar. She was introduced to a woman named Redacted, and the group lightly drank throughout the evening. At the time, Miss Lampros was a college student and did not drink any alcohol due to Mr. Combs' delusional and violent. Um, Due to Mr. Combs' delusional violent outburst, she succumbed to pressure and reluctantly drank with Mr. Combs and the other woman. As they drank, Miss Lampros began to feel uneasy. At this point, she had only had a few sips of one drink. Miss Lampros and this other woman were guided into a vehicle and left the bar with Mr. Combs. Oh. So they arrived at the Millennium Hotel. While at the hotel, Miss Lampros continued to feel uneasy. She recalls feeling like the walls were closing in on her. She was laid on the hotel bed where Mr. Combs forced himself on top of her. Mr. Combs began to kiss Mrs. Lampros as she turned her head, trying to avoid the interaction. He grabbed her face. Mr. Combs continued to kiss her forcefully. Miss Lampros informed him that she wasn't feeling well, but he ignored her words and continued to take off her clothing. Miss Lampros tried to hold onto her clothing, but she felt weak and powerless in the situation. Miss Lampros pleaded with Mr. Combs to stop and ignored Mrs. Lampros could not process why this was occurring and felt a loss of control. Miss Lampros was being victimized by Mr. Combs and she soon passed out. The next morning, Miss Lampros was awoken by sun peering through the drapes. She was nude, sore, and confused. Miss Lampros quickly got out of bed, clothed herself, left the hotel room as fast as she could. Months after the first Once after the first incident, Mr. Combs pursued Mrs. Lampros. He sent her gift cards and flowers and used his power and access to the music industry events to lure Miss Lampros back to him. Miss Lampros was a hopeful yet naive college student and took Mr. Combs at his word and believed that the first incident was a possible mulligan and decided to give him a second chance. At the time, Miss Lampros was a college student in her late teens, early 20s. Her decision to return to Mr. Combs after being victimized is indicative of many assault survivors who return to their abusers. Ms. Lampros agreed to meet with Mr. Combs to discuss the business opportunities he promised, as she knew her passion was to pursue her career in fashion and music. So, wow. So basically, he's dangling her career over her heads. I mean, how, what price will people pay for them to have that success and not to be an average American citizen working 8 to 5 and struggling like 80% of this world is? So, anyway, on with the next one. At that time, Miss Lampros agreed to meet with Mr. Combs to discuss business opportunities he promised, as he knew her passion was to pursue a career in fashion music. They met up and talked near his Manhattan apartment, which was somewhere near the 30th Street at the time. Miss Lampros was under impression that what had occurred months prior between them would not happen again. She was holding on to Mr. Combs' promises of access to his industry to pursue her passion. Ooh, craziness. So Mr. Cohn was respectfully regained her trust and used their common interactions with Arista Records, parent company of Bad Boy Records, and Mrs. Lampros was an intern at Arista Records. So now she's an intern. So however she got that job, remember, because she was an FIT student when they first met, when the first incident. Now she's an intern at Arista magically. So taking him back, losing, whatever, whatever. So let's see how he gives and takes a lot of the time. It's like one of those I'll show you kind of thing. So Mr. Cole, okay, things seem to be normal between the two until the second incident of victimization. So encounter number two. During a second incident of victimizing, Mr. Combs and Mrs. Lampros were in a parking garage near his Manhattan apartment. She believes it was somewhere near 30th Street. They were headed to dinner, and Mr. Combs was slightly inebriated. As they headed toward the parking garage, Mr. Combs grabbed Miss Lampros by the waist and forced her down to her knees. He quickly unzipped his pants, exposing his erect bratwurst, I guess. But then again, she just said this is a small one. But anyway, he then grabbed her hair, wrapping it around his fist, then forced his erect into her mouth and demanded Miss Lampros perform. As Miss Lampros' eyes filled with tears, she could see the parking garage attendant witnessing this horrific assault. This had no impact on Mr. Combs. He was blinded by the disgustful desire to pleasure himself at Miss Lampros' expense. When Mr. Combs was done with her, he told her to get up. Miss Lampros was in shock, morally depleted, embarrassed, and in physical agony because of Mr. Combs violently yanking her down to her knees and pulling her hair. Once again, Miss Lampros made the decision to distance herself, and once again, Mr. Combs came back with gifts and empty promises. Miss Lampros was not moved. She had enough and decided to focus on her studies and leave Mr. Combs for good. Unbeknownst to Mrs. Lampros, Mr. Combs was not good at accepting rejection. He immediately switched his approach and became angry, threatening, and forceful. He developed this mobster persona, and Miss Lampros was in fear of him. Mr. Combs began calling Miss Lampros insistently and would often call her just to say it. To say, if anyone is in your apartment, I will be here and theirs. Miss Lampros' reasonable fear of Mr. Combs left her feeling stuck with him and with no way out. He knew where she lived and worked and had connections to ensure her compliance with his demands. Wow. She felt if she disobeyed him, he would take away her dreams of pursuing a career in his world. Mr. Combs would also threaten um, to blacklist her in the industry if she tried to mess with him in any way. Miss Lampros' dreams and everything she's been working for were in the palm of his hands. So now we're getting to number three. Encounter number three. One night in 1996, Mr. Combs ordered Miss Lampros to his Manhattan apartment. Miss Combs' residence was in the 30s and Park near the Midtown Tunnel. When Miss Lampros arrived, Kim Porter and two people were present. So that means there's three other people alongside these two people. So there's a total of five people in this room, and two other were present. Mr. Combs introduced the women. They went to a nightclub. After the club closed, they returned to Mr. Combs' apartment and they began a night of drinking. A couple of hours in the evening, Mr. Combs forced Miss Porter and Miss Lampros to take ecstasy. Mr. Combs instructed the women to open their mouths. When they complied with the demand, Mr. Combs forced the pill down their throats to ensure the pills were swallowed, and Mr. Combs' hands were so far down Miss Lampros' throat she gagged. He even checked under their tongues. With a combination of alcohol and ecstasy, Miss Lampros recalls feeling lightheaded and lethargic after being forced to take ecstasy. Mr. Combs then demanded Kim Porter to have intercourse with Miss Lampros. Miss Lampros forcefully opposed this idea, but Mr. Combs quickly reminded her that she had no control over the situation as he could make her lose her job. Miss Lampros knew that she had to comply because she had witnessed what happens when someone defies Mr. Combs. So she's also witnessed this to him doing this to other people as well. So with all these other witnesses, these witnesses have all been involved in somehow with each other, or probably even seen each other at one point in time. Just like in this, she has witnessed this happen before. Kim has witnessed this happen before. It's just an effect. Like all these women have some type of connection to each other, and they probably don't even know it until things like this come up. Okay, Miss Macro knew that she had to comply because she has witnessed what happens when someone defies Mr. Combs. She has also been threatened and victimized by Mr. Combs and did not want to cause a problem because she feared him. As Mr. Combs demanded Miss Porter as Miss Lampros to engage in intercourse, Mr. Combs sat close by for you know pleasing himself for some time before pushing Kim Porter off Miss Lampros and forcing his package inside of her and assaulting her. Miss Lampros felt numb at the moment and emotionally checked out. A few hours later, Miss Lampros recalls being woken up by Mr. Combs and told to leave the residence. She felt disgusted, ashamed, and embarrassed and couldn't believe what had happened. Shortly after this event, Miss Lampros slowly distanced herself from Mr. Combs. Even though she was reluctant to be with him, he used industry connections and invitations to exclusive events to keep her attached. Mr. Combs went so far to invite her to Kim Porter's birthday celebration. So now, if you're going to Porter's birthday, you know there's going to be a lot of people there. From the industry and connections to, gosh, we're definitely going to have to do a timeline on all this. This is weird. This is weird. Okay. Right. And then it has the invitation below. It says, Sean Puffy Code, cordially invites you to birthday Love Kim Porter, Tuesday, December 16, 1997 at Cheetahs, blah, 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 blah. And so forth. This invite, and it's only one. So, So now let's continue to the end of the road. In or about 1998, Miss Lampros find the courage to end a relationship with Mr. Combs. She had finally suffered enough. However, this ending was one-sided. Mr. Combs and Kim Porter weren't done with Miss Lampros. Kim Porter was very resentful of Miss Lampros after she was forced to engage in these activities with Miss Lampros. She dined at Miss Lampros's place of employment, a bar named Sliver, which was in Soho. Remember that South Houston Street, whatever? Okay. According to Miss Lampros, Miss Porter was enraged when she saw her. According to Miss Lampros, 2 days later, Miss Porter called her employer and complained to the manager, alleging that Miss Lampros attempted to poison her. She then stated that her boyfriend was Sean Combs and could have the business shut down if he did not immediately terminate Miss Lampros. Later that evening, the manager told her he had to let her go because Mr. Combs called and demanded that he fire her. Mr. Mrs. Lampros believes that Miss Porter got Miss Lampros fired in retaliation of what Mr. Combs made them do. According to Miss Lampros, her boss was afraid of Mr. Combs and his contacts and told her he had to do it or Mr. Combs could risk getting his business closed. Miss Lampros could Miss Lampros called Mr. Combs and showed no remorse that she was out of a job. In fact, he had laughed. At that time, she ended the relationship. Miss Lampros recalls Mr. Combs' package being adolescently in both length and width, so he had a tiny package. She recalls him being basically circumcised and remembers a tattoo on his chest. Now we're gonna she discusses Sean John clothing. While in the relationship with Mr. Combs, Mrs. Lampros was a student at FIT. She had a passion for fashion, and Mr. Combs knew this. Mr. Combs promised Miss Lampros several working opportunities in the fashion and music industry, and the two often discussed his plans to launch his own clothing brand. Within months of Miss Lampros ending their relationship, Mr. Combs launched Sean John. Now we're going to go to number 4. So we thought that was the end of the road. That was kind of towards the end of the road. We're getting there. We're getting there. So now, according to Miss Lampros, she saw Mr. Combs at an event at Rockefeller Center in about the end of 2000, towards the beginning of 2001. At that time, Miss Lampros says Mr. Combs may have been filming a season of Making the Band. That was one of his projects back in the day. Remember, he did Danny Kane and things like that. So um, yeah. So, according to Miss Lampros, when Mr. Combs saw her, he approached Miss Lampros and asked the camera crew to turn off the cameras to not film their interaction. According to Miss Lampros, Mr. Combs asked her how she was, expressed to her that he missed her, and asked if she would lead the event at Rockefeller Center with him. Miss Lampros rejected Mr. Combs and left. According to Miss Lampros, later that evening, he kept calling her and asking if she could come to his apartment on Park Avenue, but she said no. He even offered to send his driver to pick her up. Finally, he offered to come with the driver to pick her up. Oh, Lordy, no means no, dude. Like, you hate rejection, but you keep putting yourself into being rejected. Okay, anyway. Okay, where am I? According to Miss Lampros, Mr. Combs does not like the word no. He called a few more times, so she stopped answering the phone. According to Miss Lampros, a few days later, he called again, begging to see her. Reluctantly and regrettably, she allowed him to come over to her apartment located at Parkway, excuse me, to hear what he had to say. Miss Lampros figured it was during the day and doubted that he would try to harm her. So here she is thinking she's at her own place where she thinks is a safe place. This is the only place that you have like to feel safe from him, sort of, because he does know where you live. But you bring him back into your safe place to make it unsafe. Gosh, like he had that much control over her. That's just how much. That's just how much control these type of people have over their victims. And like people always wonder why this and why that. Until you are put in that position, you will never know. You just have been fortunate enough to be one of the three people not to be. Oh, the two or three, because I think it's one of every three people are victimized. So yeah, you're one of the other two. Good job. You had a 66% chance. You had 2/3 of a chance. Okay, but don't worry, those numbers will soon change because right now the statistics are based on the people who actually have come forward. It's just logical. You can only do statistics on things that are actually factual. Until those people come forward and they have proven themselves, then yes, these numbers are going to make those numbers go extremely high. So now maybe even 1 and 2, you should be happy. You got the good side of the 50%. Okay, so okay, so on and on. So let's see. According to Miss Lampros, when she opened the door, his security was sitting on the stairwell. Knowing the security was there made Miss Lampros feel a little bit better about letting him in. They sat on the couch and began talking. According to Miss Lampros, Mr. Combs began apologizing for his past behaviors. He started telling her that he was a changed man. He then showered her with compliments, telling her how good she looked, and kept reminiscing about their prior adulterous life. He then began dropping hints about them having relationships with each other. Miss Lampros rejected his advances. Suddenly, out of nowhere, Mr. Combs violently grabbed her and forced himself onto her. He began kissing her and touching her against her will. At that point, Miss Lampros fought him after she quickly realized it was a big mistake to have allowed him to visit her. She told him to leave as she felt that he just wanted to use her for intercourse and hadn't changed at all. Well, of course. Even more disgusting was the fact that Miss Lampros knew that Mr. Combs was involved in a very public relationship with Jennifer Lopez. According to several media reports from that time, Mr. Combs ended his relationship with Jennifer Lopez due to infidelity in February 2001. this was around the same time that Mr. Combs actually assaulted Miss Lampros. So luckily for Miss Lampros, the couch was right near the door of the apartment, so it was very easy for her to reach the door, open it, and demand for him to leave. She ensured that his security could hear her telling him to exit. She was afraid that Mr. Combs would have assaulted her, as he does not take no for an answer and had a history of violently handling her and forcing her to perform, you know, things on him. Miss Lampros is a professional of several of um, Miss Lampros is in possession of several of Mr. Combs' phone numbers throughout the years. Oh wow. Miss Lampros discovered that Mr. Combs recorded and disclosed a tape of him having intercourse with her. According to Miss Lampros, in and about 2023, Miss Lampros was at a function and a gentleman whose name was redacted. So a gentleman informed the man Miss Lampros was dating that he should reconsider dating her because he personally saw a video of her and Sean Combs having relationships with each other. According to Miss Lampros, this gentleman shared that he saw the tape during the summer of 1997. According to Miss Lampros, she was told that Mr. Combs apparently recorded them having relationships without her knowing and showed it to multiple people. So not only did you tape it, you showed it to people, and now these people are still doing. I mean, how many years? 2023. So this was just recently, last year, sometime last year, of something that happened back that was seen in '97. So it had to been she during one of the first two encounters. So it was like, hmm, okay. So Miss Lampros incorporates by reference of all preceding first cause of action, which is battery. Miss Lampros incorporates by refuse of all preceding paragraphs and re-alleges them as set forth fully herein. The defendant committed battery against Miss Lampros when he penetrated Miss Lampros orally and vaginally against her will, and as detailed in the four encounters above. In addition, Miss Miss Combs physically assaulted Mr. Combs physically assaulted Miss Lampros when he pulled her hair and forced her to perform oral on him in open parking garage with the parking attendant watching. This is crazy. In addition, okay, Defendant Combs intentionally and without her consent attacked Miss Lampros to satisfy his own desires under all circumstances. The defendant's physical contact with Miss Lampros was offensive and wrongful. Defendant Combs continued to attack Miss Lampros despite her attempts to thwart his actions. The defendant's conduct was the direct and proximate cause of Miss Lampros' past and future substantial damages, including significant pain and suffering, lasting psycho- psychological and financial harm, loss of dignity and invasion of privacy. The defendant's action constitutes sexual offense as defined in Article 130 of the New York Penal Law, including but not limited to sexual misconduct and forcible touching. Okay, then the fourth cause of action against all defendants. So, let's see. Oh, then, well, then yeah, the same color can be something. Okay, that was the salt in this section. Okay. And then the third cause is the ne- negligent infliction of emotional distress. And that is Miss Ledford incorporates by reference all preceding paragraphs and alleges them as follows. Clearly, the defendant's conduct created an unreasonable risk of causing emotional distress to plaintiff, and the defendants knew or should have known that such conduct was likely to result in emotional distress that might or likely would cause illness or bodily harm. The plaintiff's emotional distress was foreseeable to the defendants as a direct and proximate result of the negligent conduct of the defendant's plaintiff suffered and will continue to suffer severe emotional distress, which means she's always in PTSD, lifelong mental illness. Can't treat it. You can contain it, can't cure it. Okay. Anyway, defendant's conduct was wanton, malicious, willful, and or cruel, entitling plaintiff to punitive damages. This cause of action is timely under the adult survivors because it arises of conduct perpetrated against plaintiff who was the statutory age or older at the time of conduct, which constitutes multiple um, sexual offenses as defined in Article 130. Ms. Lampros, okay, now the fourth cause of action, which is against all of them, the violation of victims of gender motivated violence protection law. So Ms. Lampers incorporates by reference all preceding paragraphs alleges them as set forth with fully herein the above described conduct of defendant Combs, including but not limited to Combs' assaults of plaintiffs in New York City constitutes crime violence against plaintiff and is a crime violence motivated by gender as defined by that. Defendant, let's see. Okay, so now it just says why all those other people should be held responsible. Um, okay. So y'all let me know what y'all think. Y'all can go online and see the pictures. They have pictures of the invitations. They have pictures of this lady at this at his home. Um, we already know he apologized for the video Cassie, which we'll go over in another segment. I'll try to go back and try to update um, people on what has been happening and also keeping them up to date on what is currently going to happen or is happening in time. So, again, this is Addition T with D. Just hit the like button and the subscribe button, and thank you guys for watching.